If you want to order, get up and do it yourself. Someone laughed loudly, pointing at the man in the wheelchair near the counter. The entire cafe erupted in laughter. A few people recording videos. He didn't react, just stared straight ahead toward the window. Half an hour later, 4 military SUVs parked outside. 6 Marines walked in. Who was sitting in the middle of the cafe? Welcome to QH. Let's uncover what really happened. Samuel Grant, 71, visited Harbor Grounds Cafe every Friday at precisely 2 p.m. The ritual never varied. He would wheel himself to table 6 by the window, order a black coffee with a slice of apple pie, and spend exactly 90 minutes gazing at the harbor where Navy ships occasionally docked. Today marked the 5th anniversary of his weekly pilgrimage to this unremarkable cafe in Seaside Ridge, Florida. The staff knew him as a quiet, dignified regular. What they didn't know was the weight of memories Samuel carried, both figuratively and literally, in the small wooden box that always rested in his lap. Inside lay his Marine Corps medals, faded photographs of young men in desert camouflage, and letters he'd never sent to families of those who never returned. Samuel had lost both legs in Afghanistan, just outside Kandahar. An improvised explosive device had ended his 30-year military career, and claimed the lives of 2 Marines under his command. His weathered face, permanently tanned from years in foreign deserts, revealed little of the physical pain that still plagued him. The emotional wounds, however, were visible in his eyes. Distant, watchful, yet somehow at peace with what life had dealt him. This particular Friday, Harbor Grounds buzzed with unusual energy. A group of college students, celebrating the end of finals week, filled the normally quiet afternoon with boisterous conversation and laughter. Samuel navigated his wheelchair through the crowded space with practiced precision, nodding politely when people moved tables to accommodate his passage. At his usual spot, he placed a small laminated card on the table that read, "Veteran, please serve gently." The request wasn't for special treatment, but a practical acknowledgement of his sometimes shaky hands and startled reactions to sudden movements, residual gifts from his time in combat. Jenna, a new waitress in her early 20s, approached with a nervous smile. "Good afternoon, sir." "The usual." Samuel nodded, his voice a gravely whisper cultivated by years of shouting orders over helicopter rotors. "Thank you, young lady." From a nearby table, 3 men in their 30s, well-dressed in business casual attire, observed the exchange. One nudged another, whispering something that made them snicker. Samuel pretended not to notice, focusing instead on arranging his wooden box precisely parallel to the table edge. "Look at this," one man said, loud enough to be heard several tables away. "Special service for the supposed hero. What kind of veteran uses a wheelchair as a prop for attention?" Jenna froze, coffee pot suspended mid-pour, her eyes darting between Samuel and the men. "It's all right," Samuel said, quietly. "Please continue." The leader of the group, emboldened by Samuel's non-reaction, raised his voice further. "What kind of veteran begs for special treatment with a little card? My grandfather was in Vietnam, and he never asked for handout." The cafe quieted momentarily. Patrons glanced uncomfortably between the hecklers and Samuel, but no one intervened. Samuel simply pulled his wooden box closer, as if protecting the memories inside from contamination. With deliberate calmness, he sipped his coffee, gazing out the window while ignoring the continued jibes. His reaction, or lack thereof, seemed to further irritate the men, who began theorizing loudly about fake veterans and professional victims. Jenna approached him again, her voice barely audible. "Sir, would you like me to ask them to stop? Or maybe call the manager?" Samuel looked up at her, a gentle smile creasing his weathered face. "No need, miss. There was a time when words like those would have mattered to me. That time has long passed." He returned to his coffee and his view of the harbor, seemingly undisturbed by the growing hostility just a few tables away. The wooden box remained under his protective hand. There are people who choose not to react, not out of weakness, but because they've walked through battlefields. As Samuel sipped his coffee, the 3 men grew increasingly bold. The tallest one, wearing an expensive watch and a smirk that suggested he'd never been denied anything in life, began recording with his smartphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've got ourselves a genuine American hero," he narrated mockingly. "So heroic he needs a special card to get his coffee." His companions laughed on cue. Several cafe patrons shifted uncomfortably in their seats, but intervention remained limited to disapproving glances. When Samuel reached for his fork, his hand trembled slightly, a combination of age and nerve damage from his military service. The utensil slipped from his grasp, clattering onto the floor beside his wheelchair. "Stand up and get it yourself," shouted one of the men, triggering another round of laughter. Samuel assessed the situation with tactical precision. The fork lay just beyond his reach. Attempting to retrieve it would require maneuvering his wheelchair in the confined space, potentially disrupting other customers. With the same calculated patience that had once guided him through minefields, he began the careful process of repositioning his chair. Jenna hurried over. "Please let me get that for you, sir." Samuel paused, looking up at her with clear eyes. "It's all right, I'm used to it." His simple response, devoid of self-pity or anger, fell into a suddenly silent cafe. The weight of his quiet dignity seemed to momentarily dampen even the heckler's enthusiasm. In that brief moment of quiet, an older woman sitting alone in the corner studied Samuel more carefully. Her eyes widened slightly in recognition, as she noticed the small bronze pin on his jacket lapel, a distinctive emblem representing a specialized Marine unit that had been decommissioned years ago. Without drawing attention, she slipped outside, phone already in hand. The moment passed. The three men, perhaps unsettled by the temporary silence their cruelty had created, doubled down. The leader posted the video online with the caption, "Coffee Shop Warrior, Cheap Drama." Within minutes, notifications began lighting up his phone as the post gained traction. "Look at that, we're going viral," he announced proudly. "People love seeing these fake heroes get exposed." Samuel continued eating his apple pie in measured bites, his expression unchanging. To casual observers, he appeared either oblivious or resigned to the mockery, but the slight tightening of his jaw and the methodical way he repositioned his wooden box betrayed awareness of every word. A middle-aged man in nondescript clothing sitting at the counter observed the scene intently when Samuel opened his box to check his watch, revealing a glimpse of military medals inside. The observer's eyebrows raised fractionally. He quietly paid his bill and stepped outside, phone pressed to his ear. "Commander, it's Reeves. You're not going to believe who I just saw at Harbor Grounds." "Yes, sir, Samuel Grant." "The Samuel Grant from Fallujah?" "No, sir, I'm certain. Still has that wooden box." "They're disrespecting him, sir." "Yes, sir, I'll wait here." Inside the cafe, the situation continued deteriorating. One of the men wadded up a napkin and tossed it toward Samuel's table, landing it perfectly in his open wooden box. Inside, partially visible now, lay a weathered envelope. The exposed corner revealed a handwritten line. "If I never make it back, Sam is the man to trust." Samuel's hand moved with surprising speed to close the box, his knuckles whitening as he gripped the wooden edges. For the first time, his expression darkened momentarily before returning to its practiced neutrality. "Ooh, did we touch a nerve?" taunted the leader. "What's in the box, old man?" "Participation trophies." A few customers began gathering their belongings, uncomfortable with the escalating situation, but unwilling to become involved. The cafe manager, a young man barely out of college, hovered uncertainly near the counter, clearly conflicted between confronting paying customers and protecting another. Samuel checked his watch again, a military-issue timepiece with a scratched face that had survived more combat than most soldiers. It was now 3:15 p.m., 15 minutes remained in his weekly ritual. Despite the hostility surrounding him, he showed no signs of departing early. As if sensing the unasked question, he spoke softly to Jenna when she brought him a refill. "I come here every Friday at this time because I made a promise." "A promise to who?" she asked, glancing nervously at the three men who were now scrolling through their phones, admiring their growing social media attention. "To the men who couldn't come home," Samuel replied simply. "We agreed that whoever survived would remember the other." This was the last American cafe several of them visited before deployment. He gestured subtly toward the harbor. "Their ship left from that dock." Jenna nodded, suddenly understanding the ritual's importance. "They're still watching the video. It already has hundreds of views," she whispered, horrified. Samuel's expression didn't change. "Young lady, when you've had real bullets fired at you, camera phones don't seem very threatening." Outside, more vehicles began arriving in the parking lot, their occupants remaining inside with engines running. The man named Reeves stood by the entrance, checking his watch periodically as if awaiting a precisely timed operation. Samuel Grant continued his vigil by the window, seemingly oblivious to the mockery and the gathering storm outside. His weathered hands rested protectively on the wooden box, guarding memories that no viral video could ever diminish. Type respect if you believe the quietest people are often those who have sacrificed the most. The mockery reached its peak when the tallest man, emboldened by online validation, approached Samuel's table. Leaning down with a condescending smirk, he spoke loudly enough for everyone to hear. "You know what I think? I think you're wearing that veteran gear from a costume shop." Samuel met his gaze with steady eyes that had once tracked enemy movements across mountain ranges, but said nothing. "Real soldiers have discipline, strength, The man continued enjoying his audience's attention. They don't beg for sympathy with little cards. Several customers looked away in embarrassment. Jenna hovered nearby, coffee pot clutched like a weapon, uncertain how to intervene. One of the man's companions aimed his phone directly at Samuel. Come on, hero, say something for our follower. They're loving this expose of stolen valor. Samuel's silence seemed to infuriate them further. The leader reached toward the wooden box, fingers inches from the lid. What's so precious in here anyway? Let's see these supposed medals. Samuel's hand shot out with surprising speed, gripping the man's wrist. He didn't squeeze or twist, just held it with the quiet certainty of someone who once subdued enemies with his bare hands. Not this, Samuel said softly. Not ever. The sudden reaction startled everyone, including the heckler, who yanked his arm back as if burned. Did you see that? He assaulted me. He looked around for support, finding only uncomfortable stares. I'm getting the manager. This guy's dangerous. Outside, a synchronous rumble of engines broke the tension. Through the cafe's large front windows, patrons watched as 4 black military SUVs pulled up in perfect formation. Behind them, a command jeep flying a Marine Corps flag stopped directly at the entrance. The cafe fell completely silent. 6 Marines in immaculate service uniforms entered with disciplined precision. Their crisp movements and decorated chests spoke of extensive combat experience. The oldest among them, a silver-haired man with a bearing of natural authority, surveyed the room before his eyes locked on Samuel. The 3 hecklers, suddenly pale, retreated to their table. One frantically tried deleting the video from his social media as the Marines approached Samuel's table. The silver-haired officer stepped forward and rendered a perfect salute. Sergeant Major Grant, Alpha Company 3rd Battalion. Sir, we apologize for being late. The other Marines formed a respectful semicircle around Samuel's table, each saluting in turn. The oldest officer continued, his voice carrying effortlessly through the silent cafe. Sergeant Major Grant led one of the most successful rescue operations in modern Marine Corps history. Fallujah, 2004. 12 Marines cut off behind enemy lines. Against direct orders, Grant went back in. He turned to address the entire cafe now. I was one of those 12. 3 days pinned down, ammunition nearly gone. Grant not only found us, he created an extraction route by clearing buildings single-handedly. He was shot twice during the operation, but refused medical evacuation, until every Marine was accounted for. The officer's voice tightened with emotion. When the helicopter finally lifted off, insurgents targeted it with RPGs. Grant used his body to shield 2 wounded Marines. The resulting injuries eventually cost him both legs, but he saved every one of us. From a polished wooden case, the officer produced a gleaming medal on a blue ribbon. The Navy Cross that should have been awarded years ago. Administrative errors, and Grant's own insistence on avoiding recognition delayed this moment. Today we correct that mistake. As the medal was ceremoniously placed in Samuel's hands, one of the younger Marines stepped forward, his voice breaking slightly. Sergeant Major Grant pulled me from burning wreckage after our vehicle hit an IED. I've waited 15 years to thank you. The cafe remained frozen in stunned silence, as each Marine shared a brief testimony of Samuel's impact on their lives. Several patrons wiped away tears. The 3 hecklers, now hunched in their seats, stared fixedly at the floor. When the last Marine finished speaking, Samuel finally broke his silence. These honors belong to those who didn't come home, he said, voice steady. I accept only as their representative. Jenna, the young waitress, had retreated behind the counter, tears streaming down her face. I'm so sorry, she whispered, when Samuel caught her eye. I should have said something, should have stopped them. Samuel shook his head gently. You've done more than enough. You've provided a place for remembrance every Friday for 5 years. That matters more than you know. One of the hecklers, shame finally overwhelming arrogance, approached hesitantly. Sir, we had no idea. The video, I'll take it down immediately. Samuel regarded him thoughtfully. Leave it up. Sir, let people see what happens when we judge without knowing someone's story. Perhaps it will make them think twice next time. The cafe manager, finally finding his courage, approached. Sergeant Major, your money's no good here anymore. Not today, not ever again. Samuel shook his head. I'll pay my bill like anyone else. Special treatment wasn't what I fought for. As the Marines prepared to depart, having completed their official mission, the silver-haired officer leaned close to Samuel. We'll be back next Friday if that's acceptable. Some debts can never be fully repaid, but we'd like to try. For the first time that day, Samuel's stoic expression softened into something resembling a smile. Table 6, 1400 hours, brings stories of the others. After they departed, Samuel remained at his table, completing his ritual 90 minutes as originally planned. The three hecklers left quietly, their social media accounts now flooded with angry comments, as the truth about Samuel spread across local networks. Before Samuel departed, Jenna approached one final time. "Can I ask what's in the box? The one you protected so carefully?" Samuel hesitated, then opened the wooden container. Inside lay several medals, yes, but also a collection of small personal items. A worn baseball, a poker chip, a scratched Zippo lighter, a folded sonogram image. "These belong to men who asked me to remember them," Samuel explained. "Things they carried for luck or love. I promised to protect them until we meet again." Jenna nodded, understanding dawning in her eyes. "And that's why you come here, to keep that promise. Every Friday, same table, same time." Samuel closed the box carefully, because somewhere they're watching, making sure I remember. As Samuel wheeled himself toward the exit, customers stood one by one in silent respect, a belated but heartfelt acknowledgement of the quiet hero who had sat among them, unrecognized for years. What moment in life do you think would make an entire room fall silent with shame? I still remember that moment when they stood at attention around him. In the weeks that followed, Harbor Grounds underwent a transformation that nobody could have predicted. Table 6, Samuel's regular spot, now bore a small bronze plaque, reserved for those who when not occupied by Samuel during his Friday vigil. The table was available exclusively to military veterans. A framed photograph of Samuel receiving his Navy Cross hung nearby, captioned simply, "Not all heroes wear their medals." True to their word, the Marines returned the following Friday. 6 of them, representing different generations of service, joined Samuel at a larger table, pushed adjacent to his regular spot. Their conversation was quiet, but punctuated by occasional laughter. The unique camaraderie of those who had faced death together and lived to remember those who hadn't. This became a new tradition. Each Friday at 2 p.m., Samuel would arrive first, taking his place at table 6. By 2:15 he would be joined by Marines in civilian clothing, their military bearing unmistakable despite the casual attire. Sometimes there were 3, sometimes a dozen. The oldest among them had served in Vietnam, the youngest had recently returned from Syria. Samuel welcomed them all equally as guardians of the same flame. The wooden box remained Samuel's constant companion, but its contents had expanded. Each Marine who joined his weekly gathering contributed something small, a unit coin, a handwritten note, a photograph. One by one they entrusted Samuel with their most precious memories, understanding that no one would protect them more fiercely. Jenna, the young waitress who had witnessed Samuel's humiliation and vindication, requested permanent assignment to the Friday afternoon shift. Under her initiative, the Café instituted a suspended coffee program, where customers could prepay for veterans' orders. The wall near the register soon filled with post-it notes from patrons: "Coffee for the next veteran, with gratitude," or "Meal for someone who served in memory of my grandfather." The 3 men who had mocked Samuel never returned to Harbor Grounds. Their viral video, which they had left online at Samuel's suggestion, became an unexpected educational tool, shared by military family support groups and sensitivity training programs. It accumulated millions of views, each one a potential lesson in looking beyond appearances. Samuel himself remained largely unchanged by his newfound local celebrity. He still arrived precisely at 2 p.m. each Friday. He still ordered black coffee and apple pie. He still spent exactly 90 minutes in quiet remembrance. The only difference was that he was no longer alone in his ritual. On her personal social media page, Jenna shared a reflection that resonated far beyond her small circle of friends. "I witnessed justice arrive, not through angry words, but through a silence that made an entire room stand up." An elderly woman who had been present during Samuel's humiliation later told a local newspaper, "I used to think he was just a lonely old man sitting by himself. Now I see he was a fortress we never recognized." Perhaps the most meaningful change came 6 months later, when Samuel allowed a local school group to interview him for a history project. After decades of silence about his service, he finally shared his story with the next generation. Not tales of heroism or combat, but simple truths about loyalty, sacrifice, and remembering those left behind. When asked by a 10-year-old student why he hadn't defended himself against the mockery that day, Samuel's answer was characteristically straightforward. "When you've held dying friends in your arms, cruel words lose their power to hurt you. I've been wounded by experts." Another child asked what he wanted people to remember about veterans like him. Samuel thought for a moment before responding that we are still keeping promises made long ago. On battlefields, most people have forgotten. How many people silently endure ridicule and disrespect simply because the world has forgotten how much they've already given?
The story of Sergeant Major Samuel Grant reminds us that heroism rarely announces itself. It doesn't demand recognition or special treatment. Often it sits quietly among us, keeping decades-old promises that the rest of the world never knew were. And yet perhaps the most profound part of Samuel's story was not the moment the Marines arrived, but that he would have kept coming regardless. In an age obsessed with recognition, he sought not. What mattered to him was that every coffee, every memory, every Friday stood as proof. The fallen were not forgotten, and promises once made would be honored, until his last breath. What strikes me most about this story isn't the moment when the Marines arrive to honor Samuel, though that scene of justice brings satisfaction to anyone who values respect and dignity. No, what truly moves me is Samuel's unwavering commitment to his weekly ritual, regardless of how others treated him. His dedication wasn't contingent on appreciation or recognition. He sat at table 6 every Friday, not for himself, but for those who could no longer be there. In our world of instant outrage and performative virtue, Samuel's quiet dignity serves as a powerful counterpoint. He didn't need social media campaigns or public outrage to validate his worth. His value was established long ago in moments of sacrifice that most of us will never comprehend. If you know someone like Samuel, someone who carries invisible burdens of service and sacrifice, write their name in the comments. Don't let them fade into silence. Perhaps we all have something to learn from that wooden box Samuel protected so fiercely. Like that box, each of us contains hidden stories and treasured memories that aren't immediately visible to others. Before we judge, before we mock, before we assume we understand someone's story based on outward appearances, we might remember the lesson of harbor ground. The quietest person in the room might be the one who has given the most. There are stories for which a lifetime isn't enough to express adequate gratitude, but as long as you remember, they never truly vanish from history. Incredible stories will continue sharing what might otherwise be forgotten. In a world that increasingly values noise over substance, may we all learn to recognize the Samuel Grants among us, those quiet heroes whose greatest battles and most profound victories might never make headlines, but whose character shapes the world around them in ways we rarely acknowledge until someone helps us truly see. Subscribe to Incredible Stories, where respect lives on. We told their story. You gave it meaning. Thank you.